Welcome to Let's Talk for May 2022. My name is George Ferrari and I serve as CEO of our community foundation. Very happy that you've made time to be with us here today, 30 minutes to learn a little bit more about happenings and news in the mission-driven sector. We're very excited today. We have our own Janet Cotraccia, who's our Chief Impact Officer, talking about resilient communities. Janet has done one of these in the past, at least one, maybe two, can't remember. We've done so many Let's Talks. Let's Talks happen on a monthly basis. Our next Let's Talk comes up on June 14th with Karen Yearwood, one of the co-chairs of Reimagining Public Safety. And then in July, with a date yet to be determined, we'll have folks from Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. And as we continue to schedule these for the remainder of the year, Amy Levere is the lead here for that here at Community Foundation. Any of us are happy to get information about topics or speakers that you think would make a good Let's Talk presentation for the remainder of 2022. All of our Let's Talk presentations have been recorded and archived on our website, and encourage you to take a look at those, as well as inviting you to our in-person event on June 7th. Our annual celebration will be at Stewart Park. Very happy and excited to be gathering at a wonderful cultural asset park in our community, and we'll be talking about our theme of perseverance. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Janet now.
All right. Well, first of all, hello. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. I'm really excited to share with you today about some of our impacts this past year and the various ways that we carry out that work. We continue to celebrate our new mission, which was updated as part of our strategic planning process in 2021. We bring people and resources together to build a more equitable Tompkins County by inspiring diverse philanthropy, catalyzing collaborations, and championing inclusion and justice. I'm going to talk about four impact areas that reflect that mission. And today, I'm going to start with mobilizing financial support. I'm sure that's the area most people are familiar with. A quick look back, since 2010, our grants have steadily grown over that time frame, resulting in more grants than ever before in 2021 to the tune of $2.8 million. This is a 586% increase in overall grant dollars awarded since 2010. And of course, here's the number of grants we make annually, also showing that steady incline. We made 687 grants last year in 2021. What are those grants, you perhaps are wondering? For example, yesterday, we announced grants from our Resilient Communities Spring Grant Cycle. We awarded over $348,000 to 50 different locally serving organizations. To illustrate the role we play as matchmaker, dollars supporting this grant cycle came from 21 different funds held here at the foundation, as well as funds that we administer for the Helen Thomas Holland Foundation, which is a trust held at M&T Bank. We are well positioned to administer dollars from other entities as well. Some of our funds have specialized areas of support, so we ask applicants if their request falls into those areas. So many funds, many philanthropic priorities for those funds, reflecting huge swaths, huge cross-section of our community. So we have funds focusing on aging, animal welfare, arts and culture, birth to three, environmental preservation, women, a whole host of them. But you do not need to fall into any of those particular areas to apply for funding in one of our grant cycles. So for example, we also in this grant cycle have just allocated $100,000 from unrestricted funds addressing a wide range of needs in our community. So one of the changes that's been made in this past couple of years, in 2021, we really shifted our grant cycle priority from program grants to unrestricted grants. So this grant cycle that was just awarded yesterday, these are unrestricted grants providing flexible support for wherever they're needed most for organizations to successfully carry out their mission. We review applications with methods that foster a culture of assessment and adjustment, building resiliency as organizations continue to adapt in these unprecedented territory. And reviewers emphasize collaboration and strengthening organizational capacity to effectively carry out mission. I'm going to talk about our role in convening, some of the ways we convene and connect. So back to that grant cycle, who makes all of these funding recommendations? Well, you do. Here are the beautiful faces of our fall 2021 review team members. We bring new community members into our review processes all the time. Perhaps you love libraries. Here are the faces of our 2022 library grant cycle review team. And this team did an amazing job in forming over $200,000 of grants to the 33 libraries in the Finger Lakes Library System. And here are the members of our 2022 Spring Grant Cycle review teams. And this cohort represents our largest review team cohort to date. If you would like to be a future review team member, please visit our website and complete a volunteer form found under Employment and Volunteering, and email that to admin@. And I believe that somebody's going to pop that in the chat as well, so you know how to do that. Other ways that we convene and connect are through our Let's Talk series, which started in 2020. This is a monthly series, recordings of which can always be found on our website. And if there's a topic you think we should be covering, please reach out to a staff member and let us know. Perhaps George already shared some of the upcoming, but we'll do that before we wrap up today. Next, I'd like to touch on supporting sector health. The sector I think of as the mission-driven sector, also known as the nonprofit sector. One of the ways we do this is by meeting with other local funders regularly, a couple of times a month. We meet to talk about emerging needs. We hear presentations from community leaders related to those either emerging or longstanding needs, and we seek opportunities to collaborate together to have greater impact. One example of that, of how we learn from each other, John Mazzello of the Human Services Coalition recently shared highlights from a survey that they carried out, which reinforced many of our own observations. And I'd love to give you a little rundown of some of those challenges and successes that our local nonprofits have experienced. So for example, some of the organizational challenges we're seeing is that more than 2/3 of the local organizations surveyed report having a hard time hiring or retaining staff. And some organizations report having shortages of volunteers. Perhaps you volunteered pre-pandemic and are looking for new opportunities. There's new volunteer models organizations are using. There's the traditional volunteer models. And so I encourage you to reach out to your favorite organizations and find out ways you can do that, including us. Organizations are dealing with a turnover of both staff and senior leadership, which poses challenges. Obviously, that can be disruptive to some of the known protocols for carrying out services. There's a loss of historical knowledge within an organization when there's turnover. And we're also seeing that most organizations report that pandemic-related impacts are stabilizing and that demand for services is plateauing finally in many ways. The exception to that, of course, being that behavioral health-related providers are continuing to see extremely high demand for services. We're also seeing that organizations report needing funding for general operating, capacity building, strategic planning, benefits such as retirement, and that there's higher costs related to staff salaries, supplies, facility upgrades. So this is one of the reasons that we shifted to that unrestricted support in our grant cycles. We're also hearing from organizations that they need more board members and they have a need to attract more diverse talent. some of the successes that have been noted. About half of organizations report having made significant changes to their programs, launching new initiatives, expanding services, other adjustments to sometimes expanding back to pre-pandemic, but oftentimes new directions. A majority of organizations are seeing people in person, but also with many hybrid options like telehealth and other Zoom options, which are likely to remain. And I'm sure many are aware that that has enhanced greater access for many, particularly those in rural services, in rural areas, or who might have had other types of limitations to access services. Some agencies report improvements working on staff wellness and self-care, and that investment in staff retention has paid off. And on the flip side, we're seeing organizations report having new and engaged board members that is instilling a new vibrancy into their organizations. Support, last impact area, support access and prioritizing racial equity. Perhaps you were one of the 118 people who attended our Women's Fund event last week, which hosted Kenya Crawford, a psychotherapist who offered a presentation, or more accurately, almost an experience titled, "Is it imposter syndrome or is it racism?" And if you missed it, we have some additional resources on our website shared at the event, which we will share a link to in our chat. Recently, we also hosted with a committee, our Community Impact Committee and board members, Darrell Buckingham, a program officer from the Central New York Community Foundation, to meet and share with us about Black Equity and Excellence Advisory Council, which is a model that's active in Syracuse. It inspired further consideration for how we might advance our own work on racial equity, and it, re-inspired how the roles we played in sharing the microphone with new voices at our events, and inspiring supportive workshops like the DEI series co-sponsored with the Chamber of Commerce, and using our resources to build social capital in the community. Grants like that grant to the Black Girl Alchemy are supporting Black girlhood and the control of one's own narrative, emphasizing empowerment and sisterhood and artistic freedom. A recent project of this group enlisted over 60 children's artistic talents at the downtown Ithaca Children's Center as they mourned the loss of their teacher, DeJour Gandy Malone, who was killed in December of 2019. This project has supported connection and grief and renewal for many. And when we successfully democratize our decision-making by engaging people in review teams and other models, we assure dynamic, inclusive, and accessible programming in our community. So I just want to touched on several themes today, but if anything you heard today inspired you and engaged you and led you to learn more, we invite you to attend our upcoming annual meeting, which will be in person, celebrating perseverance. We'll be celebrating on Thursday, June 7th at Stewart Park at 5 p.m. Please register on our website, bring your ideas, questions, and your friends. And I thank you for allowing me to share today, and hope that some of your questions were already answered prior, but happy to answer some more here.
Thank you, Janet, so much for consistently engaging so many people in our community in the work of the Community Foundation, the impact that we're able to have thanks to the donors who support the work of the Community Foundation and people who care deeply about building a community that's inclusive and just for all. We have some time. We're going to go over our typical 12:30 end time because we had a little bit of interruption there. So we have time for questions, comments. You can either electronically raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and we can go from there. There's a lot going on.
I have questions, George, that were sent in advance.
Yes, Nancy.
Oh, great. Janet, the two questions. The first one I think is very quick. Someone is looking for an Indigenous or Latina therapist. Do you have a suggestion where to go?
So 211 is a fantastic resource for needs and services in the community. I frequently direct people to 211, And if you're a service provider providing new innovative services, I encourage you to contact 211 and make sure that their referral system includes your particular supports. So great resource in our community.
Second question, very specific. Does the Community Foundation make grants for people of color and disabled?
So I want to clarify quickly. We don't make grants to individuals. We make grants to nonprofits, 501c3 organizations, to municipalities, to educational organizations, but we are not able legally to make grants to individuals. But we do strive to make grants to entities that can provide individualized support for individuals in the community. So examples of that would be the Robin Fund that sits within Greater Ithaca Activity Center in GIAC, and they have an application process for individual support services. Catholic Charities provides financial support for a host of activities, and the United Way has the ALICE program through that also can be accessed through 211. So those would be some examples of how to provide to access individualized support. But looking back, and maybe we can share a link to the list of the spring grantees again, but we very much so strive to support organizations that are effectively reaching out to the BIPOC community to provide to make sure there is access and support for the BIPOC community. So you'll see on this most recent list the number of organizations, and we have a really active social justice fund that has been very innovative in reaching those communities. In terms of folks with developmental disabilities, we also provide grants to FLIC and occasionally Racker Center and a host of other organizations that serve those populations.
Thank you. And FLIC, for those of you that don't know, is Finger Lakes Living Independent Center. And
Finger Lakes Independent Center. Thank you. So I try to de-acronymize when I present, but didn't do so there. Thank you.
Another question for the Community Foundation: does the organization help others start mission-driven or nonprofit organizations?
That's a great question. So I do a lot of consulting with existing nonprofits and individuals who are interested in starting nonprofits. We certainly don't see ourselves as an incubator of nonprofits. We are a robust community filled with passionate people who are very interested in a broad range of topics. And we have very much found that the most successful programs in our community are those that are actively engaging in collaboration with other entities. And so, and when I say collaboration, I don't mean you're referring individuals to other organizations. I mean, you're actively, regularly meeting with other organizations that are striving towards similar desirable outcomes, and you're developing mutually reinforcing activities. So sometimes I meet with somebody who's got a passion and an interest in starting a nonprofit, and I'll do a lot of connecting, a lot of introductions, relationship building, so that you can have some more in-depth conversations with people who have been doing some of that work in our community. And then we also do have some wonderful organizations that provide fiscal sponsorship. Center for Transformative Action comes to mind as one of our stronger fiscal sponsoring organizations locally that provides an infrastructure for organizations to get started. But it's part of a much fuller conversation. So if somebody's interested in having those, I'm happy to meet with you and more fully discuss.
So it's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to put a question in the chat or unmute yourself to ask a question. So prior
Nancy?
to your, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Ian, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I would like to ask, since we're talking about resilience, I would like to ask the extent to which inflation and pay and salaries is playing a role in some of the retention and recruitment issues that you've been hearing about at some of the local organizations. I feel like long before the pandemic, in the nonprofit sector, in many areas of the nonprofit sector and on the government side, it was just very unfortunate that we, often because we don't have policies that commit to keeping up with inflation, that commit to keeping up with insane rising costs of living. And in a way that's always troubled me so deeply, that if you're passionate enough to commit to service, to a life of serving others, you have to sacrifice some basic financial stability. And I know there are many reasons why it happens, and we should all strive to do better. I'm sharing it because as I read these articles that say things like, mental health is out of control, we need more resources, I'm comparing that, I'm thinking about my friends who work in those areas and are quitting in droves and are saying we're burned out and they feel very mistreated. And I don't say that in a malicious way. I know funding is an issue. So that's my question. To what extent is that playing a role in retention and recruitment? Because I feel like if we as a community don't wrap our heads around this, aside from it just not being fair, we're not going to get those human resources we need to tackle some of the big issues going forward.
Thank you for bringing that up. These are very important issues that multiple of us might want to speak to here. We certainly, some of the issues I addressed in the PowerPoint. This is why we moved to unrestricted support, so that we could provide those flexible dollars, and we have had very good response to that. Because we have so many funds at the Community Foundation, we're well positioned to do a lot of philanthropy education with donors in our community. And that means talking about these issues. What are the needs of our communities? How are they retaining staff? Guess what? The big part of retaining staff is paying people well, right? It's being creative and dynamic about wellness and creating healthy environments. We've been talking in our funders group about Ithaca Guaranteed Income program that's in full swing in our county, that we, along with other funders, will be learning a great deal from, with regard to offering individuals those more flexible dollars on a monthly basis. Human Services Coalition has information about that program on their website. And then of course, our efforts in engaging more and more volunteers, so that we're not just trying to make those grants. We are really interested in engaging more donors, more people with lived experience, more individuals in the community to take deeper dives into the applications and develop relationships with our nonprofits, so that they can learn firsthand about what these pressing issues are. It is, if you have a panacea issue, by all means, share it here. But we understand that this is a journey that we're all as a community living through, and what techniques, what models can we engage in our community that combat sort of the isolation that people are experiencing, that re-engages diverse voices to all together be part of those solutions. But I'm going to invite other folks here to share on that topic as well.
Thank you, Ian, for that question, and Janet for your responses. I think they're right on the mark. We don't know the specific answer to that question, but I think common sense can lead us to a conclusion in many ways, that we know that people who work in the mission-driven sector are woefully underpaid. We know that the benefits packages don't compare to a lot of other sectors and opportunities that they might look for elsewhere. I think we also know, as people are making sense of their lives and reevaluating priorities, pandemic, post-pandemic, through pandemic, transcending pandemic, however you want to call it, people are making different decisions than they may have without an opportunity to kind of reevaluate and make some decisions. And I do think that we are concerned about the next level of leadership and frontline workers coming in and who may not be willing to work at the same pay rate, through, no judgment on it, just they may not be there for the same amount. So we know that mission driven organizations are always underfunded, undercapitalized as startups. I would say two things. One is that we're commissioning a transfer of wealth study to look at the opportunity to encourage people to come from a position of abundance and individual donors to make planned gifts to mission driven organizations. There are resources in our community that are not yet available, but could be available in the near term future to make organizations have a more reliable and stable source of funding and to increase resources available for things like salaries. And we'll release that later on this year. You might also want to check on WHCU yesterday in the morning local news. Natasha Thompson, who happens to be on our board, and she's the CEO and president of the Food Bank of Southern here, talked very specifically about how inflation, both with fuel costs and food costs, is affecting running the food bank and people who are being served. And I know that Ellie Evans is on the Zoom right here, can speak to that from the FoodNet Meals on Wheels perspective as well. So we know that those things are negatively affecting organizations' ability, but we also have an opportunity with what the transfer of wealth is going to tell us to generate additional charitable gifts to these needs because the resources are available in our community. Thank you for that question. Other comments in that vein, or any other questions?
I would love to say, operating is fundraising is my area in particular, and why is it so unattractive to donors? Why is it the Community Foundation chose to move more successfully to giving out grants for operating support? Because it's core to doing business, and we all need to be able to say that, in order to do our business and do it well, we need to be able to raise operating support. And it's something we should be able to speak to, and not as fundraisers have to spin it to other areas that are important. But we do that, right? As fundraisers, we tend not to talk about operating support because it's not attractive to donors. So it's something else, just another way to think about it.
Good point. I see Allie's hand is up.
I would just love to say, on behalf of the nonprofits in the world, the Community Foundation staff has always been such a great set of shoulders and ears and brains and hearts to listen when we have a question or a need about moving towards funding operational costs, or the transition in philanthropy that supports us and really supports us. It's an evolving thing, and that's because of the staff of the Community Foundation that listens to things like that were just said by Ian and others. Thank you for doing that, because we're making this shift. It is shifting in our community, and it's because we have a supportive Community Foundation that is willing to listen and make it go that extra bit. So thank you for that, because I think it's making a big difference.
Thank you. And I think that's our calling. That's our responsibility. That's our vision of how we do community philanthropy. We would not want to do it in any other kind of a way. So thank you for thanking us for doing what we feel is our calling and our mission, and for calling us our various body parts. I appreciate that. Shoulders and heads and hearts and brains. As we begin to wrap up, any other final questions or comments, Janet, that you'd like to make in summary?
I just want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you for your continued investment of emotional, mental, financial support within our community. As I talk to other community foundations, I'm continuously, as difficult as times are, continuously struck by the amazing resources we have in our community, wonderful relationships. We continue to be a transient community where we bring new people into our processes, talk to each other, talk to your volunteers, talk to your favorite organizations, Ask people, what do they need? One of the things that has been, I've really worked hard this past year to, when I talk with different nonprofits, to thank them and to especially leaders, to thank them for their resiliency, to thank them for their creative work. And it has been clear that is not something they're hearing every day.
Mhm.
So reach out to your organizations, thank them for the great work that they have done, and give them the support they need to continue to do amazing work in our community that's creating the resiliency that we're observing, and that continues to address emerging needs in dynamic, creative ways. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Janet. And thank you all for being resilient as we had some tech issues. We transcended those. We stay in connection and relationship and community with each other. We build the social capital that we have to build more resilient communities. We are so appreciative of you as collaborators, grantees, grant seekers, donors, supporters, cheerleaders. It takes all of us to do the work that we're doing. So we hope to see you in 2 weeks in person at June 7th at our annual celebration with a very special diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice announcement about renewed commitment to the Community Foundation. And then our next Let's Talk will be a week after that on June 14th with Karen Yearwood, Reimagining Public Safety. And we'll be letting you know about the next meeting in July with Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful spring day.